The conflict in the country of Mozambique highlights the country's many decade-long problems. Despite so many people being killed by the Islamist insurgents, the government has opted to downplay the violence, calling attention to the terrible state of the country. This is very surprising, as the country has vast amounts of resources, but due to the government's incompetence with not only these resources, but also the safety of its citizens, thousands have fled seeking protection. However, there was no protection for one town. This was tragically and brutally revealed when the town of Palma in northern Mozambique was attacked and captured by militants linked with ISIS, causing many people in Mozambique to flee to an international hotel seeking protection and hoping for a rescue from the militants by the Mozambican government. However, sadly, instead, their bodies were found just a few days later. A little while after this, the town was eventually liberated after a bloody gun battle. However, the militants have been so difficult to track that the insurgency is still ongoing, forcing the government to ask the international community for military support in crushing the insurgency. Even though many international troops have been helping the Mozambican government battling the insurgents, the group hasn't yet been defeated. So why? Why is there an insurgency? What is the insurgent group and their goals? But most importantly, why has the Mozambique government struggled to stamp them out? Like all conflicts around the world, to understand it fully, you need to understand where the conflict is happening and the context, i.e. the history surrounding it. Firstly, Mozambique is located in southeastern Africa, bordered by the Indian Ocean to the east, Tanzania to the north, Malawi and Zambia to the northwest, Zimbabwe to the west, and Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland, along with South Africa to the southwest. Finally, it's separated from the island of Madagascar by the Mozambique Channel. Being a former Portuguese colony, the country mainly speaks Portuguese, along with a number of other African languages. At over 303,000 land square miles, we are talking about a country that's just slightly larger than Turkey on the crossroads of Europe and Asia, but yet smaller than Namibia in southwestern Africa. Now, unlike other conflicts which we have covered, interestingly, the conflict is not centred nationally all across Mozambique, but rather in just a particular region of the country. This region, Cabo Delgado. This is Mozambique's most northern region. This is where the country meets Tanzania. If you look at religion in Mozambique, you can really understand much better the situation. The majority of Mozambique's citizens are Christian. According to a 2017 estimate, this number is just under 60%. Just under 19% were Muslim, and the rest being either atheist, a tribal African religion, or another mainstream religion. To understand why its Muslim community is there, we need to go back to around the 10th century when Muslim traders and explorers from the Middle East went south, eventually establishing a community there where they largely remained free to trade and practice their religion, spreading it to the locals. Now, to understand why its Christian community is there, we need to go back to around the 14th century when the growing majority Catholic Portuguese Empire was banned from gaining spices obtained in India from the Ottoman Empire. This forced both Spain and Portugal, the dominant powers of back then, to try to bypass the Ottomans, to try to discover their own route to India, to try to gain spices to enrich their kingdoms. While Spain went west, eventually finding Caribbean islands, Portugal decided to go south across the Cape of Good Hope, along the way visiting modern Mozambique and converting the locals there to Catholicism. However, as Portuguese ships filled with spices and other extremely expensive goods sailed across the vast oceans, this made them a target for local pirates in the region. This forced Portugal to establish a series of small outposts in Africa, mainly along the coastal areas, in an effort to stop the plundering of their ships along the way back to Portugal. Skipping forward to the end of World War II and the establishment of the United Nations. The United Nations, after a few more years, ordered all European powers to decolonise, including the Portuguese with their African colonies of Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau, Sao Tome and Principe, Angola, and most importantly for our story, Mozambique. While other European countries began to pull out of their colonies in the 50s and 60s, such as France and the UK, the Portuguese were not, arguing that it was just another overseas province of Portugal, it wasn't a colony. However, as other surrounding African countries gained their independence, the locals of Portuguese Mozambique began to become resentful and form groups to fight the Portuguese, the largest and most known of which being Frelimo in 1962. A socialist independence activist group, the organisation attracted much material support from the Soviet Union and China. After 12 years of heavy fighting, thousands from both sides had been killed. On top of this, the relatively small Portuguese military was also fighting independence movements in its other colonies, with the Portuguese population and military at home not liking the never-ending wars. A left-wing military faction within the Portuguese military orchestrated a coup overthrowing the Portuguese government. The new left-wing Portuguese government decided to grant independence to its colonies, including Mozambique. In 1975, most of its citizens and military evacuated from Portuguese Mozambique. The country gained independence under a Frelimo government. However, with independence, Mozambique descended into yet another war, as rebels, which despised the now Marxist-Leninist government, took up arms, gaining support from apartheid South Africa and Rhodesia. This war, the Mozambican Civil War, which lasted for just over 15 years, ruined the country, eventually finally ending in 1992 when the rebels, Renamo, agreed to multi-party elections 2 years later. In the ongoing years, finally the country began to develop. While its economy mainly relied on farming crops, it eventually began to exploit its natural resources, including its vast supply of gold, platinum, and even diamonds. However, starting in 2013 again, Renamo launched yet another insurgency, eventually ending in 2019. During this period, the government discovered vast amounts of natural gas off its coast, with the largest supply of which located off its northern province. However, starting in 2017, an Islamist insurgency began. Inspired officially by the fighting in the Middle East, the vast majority of troops involved in the insurgency are locals, with many being forcibly conscripted by being kidnapped, probably under the threat of execution if they didn't fight for the shadowy group. The group also took advantage of the high unemployment rate among locals, along with the poor quality education in the region, many having nothing to lose to join and fight for this group. Many also became jealous of foreign companies thousands of miles away making big money, whilst barely seeing much of it themselves. So what's the group's goals? Well, this is where it gets misty. Although they claim to have links with ISIS, with it being extremely hard to maintain contact with them, the motivation behind this is more probably that last reason of how they recruit locals, about how all these foreign projects bring little to the average citizen. They claim they want to create a caliphate there, but they also know that with many different countries helping the government of Mozambique, it would be best for them to launch a series of well-coordinated isolated attacks to take over some territory which they could potentially hold on to, rather than to overextend themselves like ISIS did in Iraq and Syria. This obviously makes them fight differently to their ISIS counterparts. These reasons basically answer practically everything, despite all these foreign projects that were intended to tap into Mozambique's vast supply of natural resources. The official benefit of it was that these projects would eventually employ locals, trickling down wealth to them and giving them a better life. Ironically, their insurgency has caused these exact projects intended to provide jobs to these people to shut down due to their insurgency. This will only continue their frustration with the government, and the whole cycle will sadly continue. But the final question still remains: why has the Mozambican government not stamped them out? I mean, the insurgency has been going on for over 4 years now. Well, firstly, one of the main reasons is because of all these motivating factors. Although Mozambique has massive potential, the majority of Mozambique citizens live in poverty with basically no good future and with little education. And so, the many youngsters joining the group have nothing to lose fighting their government that has failed to help them. The second reason is more due to religion, as the vast majority of Mozambique's population are Christian and the northern region is majority Muslim. The government has been accused of doing practically nothing to help the community against discrimination. Although Muslims in the country have largely not been persecuted by the government recently, they have been by their fellow citizens. Also, as mentioned before, unemployment, especially amongst the Muslims in the province of Delgado, is sky high. Instead of addressing the issue, the government has largely done nothing. The third problem is the mismanagement of the country's resources. Whilst a lot of wealth was generated by these projects before the insurgency, Mozambique is very well known for being an incredibly corrupt country, with money ending up in the pockets of elites rather than the average worker. This is why, although an Islamist insurgency is taking place in the province, there are also other groups of independent bandits who aren't really interested in building their own Islamic state there, but rather kidnap rich local elites or foreign workers, not to kill them, but for a large ransom. The fourth reason is the terrain. Although the beaches of this region could easily be a tourist attraction that would attract tons of people, the area further inland is filled with thick forests that make it perfect for insurgents to hide and shoot at people from a distance, making it hard to spot them. So that's basically it. If the government of Mozambique could solve these problems in the region, that of extreme poverty, provide employment, therefore wealth, and to protect the Muslim community there, the group would eventually run out of recruits. If the government became more competent and helped coordinate with its allies such as Rwanda and the country properly, the insurgency would be well on its way to being crushed. And let's hope that the fighting will end as quickly as possible so that these civilians can achieve a better, more safer life. With all these reasons, it's unlikely that the Mozambique government will crush the bandits or the Al-Shabaab group anytime soon. What we do know is that the innocent population of the region will suffer from not only the brutal fighting ruining their homes, but the massive potential in terms of both tourists and natural resources the region of Cabo Delgado has. I hope you found this video on Mozambique's insurgency interesting. Please like the video, maybe subscribe with the notification bell if you haven't already, and want more videos like this, maybe suggest another video that I should do. And as always, thanks for watching this video.